Hey everyone, welcome back to Integrative Psychonautics. I hope you're doing well out there. So today's video is a really important topic. It's something that I've kind of had on the back burner that I've been wanting to talk about with you guys for a while. It's something I've alluded to on the channel before, but this is really one of these key topics that you really want to internalize and understand well in order to really be able to heal and transform and level up your life. So today's topic is attachment styles and attachment theory and psychedelics, both recreational and especially therapeutic use of psychedelics, and how these connect, how these intersect, what we know, what we can kind of see, what I've experienced around this. And I will say really quick, if you're someone who's looking to use psychedelics for some sort of healing or personal growth purpose, whether that's personal development or trauma healing or just general therapy, you're going to want to know this information. So if this sounds of interest to you, please watch on. Okay, so before we go ahead and dive into this topic, I just want to kind of set the setting a little bit here. It's so awesome to be back making videos for you guys. Thank you for the kind comments a couple of you left here on the channel about my well-wishing me. It is what it is. Sometimes we have highs and lows, and that's part, I think, of being a coach is being visible and open and honest about all of that. So full context here, the audio for this video might be a little extra muted, might sound a little funny. If that's the case, that's because I had to really tweak the processing of the audio afterwards here to make this all work, because I've got a bunch of fans on me right now because it is insanely hot where I'm at in the Southwest US right now. So doing my best to make do with the current conditions and film videos, get out quality information for you. But if the audio is slightly off and it sounds a little muted or funny, that would be why. Let me see. Just quick context on this topic, and then we'll go ahead and get into it here and start talking about it. So attachment theory is a really big, deep study. It's a big, deep topic in and of itself in the world of psychology, and it is really a center point of how therapy is done and the understandings of therapy. And, it's incredibly important. That's what I'm trying to say here. So I won't be explaining attachment theory, attachment 101 from the ground up with all the details and explaining all the pieces for you. There's tons of that information here on YouTube and, in blogs and books and what have you, online podcasts and whatnot. I would encourage you to seek that out to get a better feel for all the attachment styles here. We're not going to be going into that in great depth. I will kind of touch upon it, but we're not really going to unpack all of that. But it's something that you want to understand. And it really does apply way more to psychedelic therapy and healing with psychedelics than you might imagine or you might first guess. Attachment theory is also an interesting thing. I said, it's kind of a center point of therapy, which it is experientially, but it's also something that is not used by all therapists or understood commonly across the board in therapy. There are a lot of therapists who are kind of underinformed about attachment theory. There are a lot of therapists who haven't really put together how key it is to the therapeutic process. There are a lot of therapists who don't do their therapy style, their modality, in a way that reflects an understanding of the importance of attachment theory. And yet at the same time, as I hope to convey to you over time on this channel, attachment is absolutely central to our healing process and our process of well-being as human beings. For me, I'll just say really quick that this year, 2023, has been a huge epiphany around attachment and its application to healing, its application to trauma work. If I'm going to be totally frank with you guys, which I like to be, I had a huge breakthrough myself personally with understanding how to apply attachment to myself, to my own issues this year that radically healed some really deep lingering stuff for me and really hammered home the importance of this. And so I'll be talking about this a lot more. This is absolutely at the center, in my view, of the healing process, certainly as I would like to show it to you and teach it to you. And also, I think just more generally as human beings, it's just a truism of the nervous system. So if you're interested in trauma resolution, trauma healing, figuring out how psychedelics can be used to heal yourself, we really have to start here with attachment. And this plays a lot into things I was taught in my guide training. This plays a lot into spiritual understandings of psychedelics. We can talk about how attachment applies to all these different aspects of psychedelics, probably in other videos, and hopefully you'll leave comments down below, questions down below if anything is unclear or you're curious about how what I'm about to share here connects to other parts of maybe your own experience or concepts and ideas that you know of from psychedelic therapy and using psychedelics to heal. Okay, enough said. I've kind of yammered on here. I don't want to take up too much time in the intro. Let's start talking about how these pieces fit together. How does your attachment style and attachment theory and psychedelic work fit together? And what are some of the implications here? Let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I really want to hopefully convey to you and try to make clear here, I think my mind and my brain is working well enough. It's kind of later in the day, but I think I have the brain power to convey this clearly. What I want to really kind of emphasize and start this conversation with is that attachment, this isn't like an optional thing that you can kind of know about. It's a nice thing to know about how we develop as human beings and as babies. And it's an important dimension of, psychology. And wow, isn't that interesting? Not at all. Attachment is I'm offering the idea that attachment is the central organizing factor, the core thing that our nervous system is organized around as a foundation upon which we build our worldview, our sense of self, our sense of relationships, and the filter essentially that we process all of life through, if you will. So just to kind of lay out some of the basics here about what attachment is a little bit. Essentially, we have what's called an attachment system, which is another way of saying our system in our brain and our nervous system that is responsible for our sense of relating and our sense of connecting with others. It's important to understand that human beings are fundamentally tribal, fundamentally relational, fundamentally group beings. This is how we survived in nature, was in small hunter-gatherer tribes of 150, 100, 200 people, something like that, for the vast majority of our evolutionary history, up until very recently, right? So we are used to surviving by belonging with each other, essentially. So for a human being, we're kind of a pack animal in the same way that, say wolves are, or the way chimpanzees are, right? We are built to operate in groups, and the glue of those groups that keeps them together, which equals our survival or our chances of survival, is connection, our ability to build strong connective bonds. So to the human nervous system, connection equals safety. Connection equals survival. So because of this, this is how we are organized as a creature at the most basic fundamental level. So everything in how we process life, how we experience things, is built upon this sense of safe connection. Because obviously threatening, dangerous connection is not, it's not going to really help our nervous system to feel good, right? We don't function well when we're threatened. So we're always looking to build safe connection. And this is what our attachment system does from the time we're infants through, really through our entire lives, but especially in those first 3 years, we're really, really forming and formatting our sense of what is safe, what the landscape of relationship looks and feels like. And there are a lot of qualities that indicate to us that we are safe in our nervous system or that we are somehow not safe in our nervous system, right? And so our attachment system is deeply, intimately connected to our sense of safety. And our sense of safety is deeply, intimately connected to our ability to heal or not heal. Okay, so quite obviously, hopefully this is pretty self-evident here, but if you are feeling threatened, right? If there's, a monster right over there that's going to hurt you, or you've got someone with, pointing a gun at you, that is not the moment that you're going to feel comfortable opening up and expressing your deepest emotions and exploring yourself and, resolving things. Like, we're not wired that way. Safety is primary, because safety means, okay, I'm surviving. I'm in a situation where I can deal with other things other than making sure I'm going to live, right? So safety is fundamental to our nervous system functioning in a way where we can heal. I can't put it more simply and more plainly than that, right? So because of this, what sends safety signals to the nervous system is secure attachment, safe attachment. Okay, so we have this system that's built to connect to others as a strategy to feel safe, right? So inside of the attachment system, essentially we have 4 attachment styles. We can kind of nuance that into more than 4, but essentially we have 4. We have one which is, you might call healthy or balanced or, aligned, which is secure attachment. And then we have 3 what are called insecure attachment styles. Another way of saying that would be maybe unhealthy, wounded, adaptive. It's tricky to find the right language for these other attachment styles, because therapists don't want to stigmatize people for having wounds or make it seem like that's all it is, or like it's bad to have these attachment styles. But the truth is that when we're looking at the insecure attachment styles, they are some form of response to a threat that imprinted our nervous system and caused us to adapt in a certain way, right? So those are essentially anxious attachment, avoidant attachment, which are kind of 2 extremes, 2 polarities kind of, and then you have what you might call ambivalent attachment or disorganized attachment, which is kind of this mix, a complex mix of the other 2. Anxious attachment essentially are people who are looking for connection to feel safe. So these are people who like to be close with others, and that helps them to feel regulated and safe in their nervous system. Avoidant attachment people like space and distance in order to feel safe. So they're looking to essentially give themselves enough of a buffer away from others to feel regulated and balanced in their nervous system. And then the disorganized types tend to kind of move between both of these in really complex ways that can be very challenging and confusing. So I hope that makes sense so far. We're just setting up the conversation here, but I hope that kind of paints the picture here. So we have 4 types, right? So we have anxious, avoidant, we have disorganized or ambivalent, they're both called, and then we have secure. And really, if you are anything other than secure, you want to rebalance your nervous system to be functioning through secure attachment, because that means essentially that you feel safe in your own skin. You're not necessarily feeling dysregulated for no reason. You're not necessarily projecting threat onto situations out in the world where you're not threatened. You feel present. You're capable of having boundaries. You're capable of negotiating. You have self-esteem present. You have generally a sense of relaxation and ease and well-being. And generally speaking, when we're thinking about mental health, I think secure attachment is a pretty solid descriptor or proxy or, kind of marker of good mental and emotional health. So this is what we want to be aiming ourselves towards if we are not in a secure attachment mode. I have more to say about secure attachment in the next section, but hopefully so far we're kind of setting up an understanding here. So the reason I'm sharing all of this with you, just to kind of summarize this little segment before we move on to the next, is that all of this attachment style, again, just to repeat myself here, is foundational to how we organize our understanding of the world around us, how we organize our understanding of our personal history, ourselves, our self-image, our relationship to our caregivers or parents, our sense of status in the community around us and relationships with our peers. This is the fundamental filter, again, through which we perceive and organize ourselves, that is at the foundation. So when there are wounds here, this is really what we want to be working with, because this determines, so much of how we view things and how we process life, that determines our sense of well-being. So, okay, kind of repeating myself, but I hope that makes sense. Hope I'm setting this up properly. So I guess from here we want to be talking about how this applies to, psychedelics, how do psychedelics fit into this, et cetera, et cetera. So let's unpack this a little bit more. I want to talk a little bit more about trauma and regulation, co-regulation, and how they fit with attachment. Then we'll get into psychedelics and how all of that fits together. Okay, so as you probably gathered from what I just said in that kind of introductory spiel that I just kind of rattled off there, your attachment style has a lot to do with trauma. Okay, so often what creates traumatic imprints in the nervous system is some sort of a rupture of attachment. Okay, it is some wounding, some negative imprint, some damage to our sense of relationships and the sense of relating safety. There's a lot more we could say. I'll probably do other videos about the intersection between attachment and trauma. It's a whole huge topic, but essentially, secure attachment is the primary tool that like a trauma therapist is going to use to help you heal. It's building this sense of safe connection with you as a person-to-person connection that creates that sense of having a team member, someone on your side to help you work through whatever the traumatic stuff is. There's a lot more we could say about it, but essentially, a huge part of trauma therapy and therapy in general is attachment. Okay, so a couple points I want to say about this that are known. There are a lot of studies about this. So one that you should probably know that a lot of people don't know about therapy is that they've done huge meta-analyses, a bunch of studies about what makes therapy effective, when therapy works, when it's successful, what's the determining factor. And the number one determining factor, as far as I understand it, is the amount of trust between the therapist and the client. So the more that the client and therapist have a really good sense of connection and groove together, where there's a lot of trust, there's a lot of rapport, there's a lot of safety, that's the major thing that helps the client heal and resolve. Doesn't matter, what the therapist is trained in, what modalities they're using, all this other fancy stuff, what theory, none of that really matters nearly as much as simply the very basic connection between human beings, right? So that's number one. That's what makes therapy work. Secure, safe attachment, right? Another interesting thing that I learned in some of my trauma trainings is that they've done studies in other countries that are kind of more organized around large family structures and more socialization. I'm thinking of, for example, maybe Italy or Brazil or India as examples where people are more socially connected and less isolated. And what they find in countries like that is, it's not that there's no trauma. It's not that no one ever gets PTSD in situations where there's more social connection. But in general, they find that if a person has more connection in their life, more safe relationships in their life, and they go through some sort of a traumatic event of some kind, there's a much lower likelihood that they're going to develop PTSD and have an ongoing recurring trauma pattern show up inside of themselves. By contrast, when people tend to feel more isolated, more disconnected, less connected, so in other words, their attachment is less secure in general, they tend to develop PTSD and trauma symptoms more, from what I understand. So trauma and attachment are really intimately connected. And essentially, what helps us to process through or discharge or offload a traumatic pattern that may be kind of held in our nervous system is the quality of safety in a relationship, right? Now, we could get into all kinds of implications of our current world and the way people relate to each other and the impacts of, isolation and the loneliness epidemic and, isolation online and the way mental illness can isolate you and how that can become a circular thing. There's a lot there we could talk about that I think is really poignant and important and relevant, but I've already got a lot to talk about here. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole quite yet in this video. So your attachment style is intimately connected with, how easy it is for you to heal. The other point I want to make here is that your attachment style has a lot to do with how you feel safe, how you feel regulated, and how you feel co-regulated. Okay, so let me make this brief because I've got a bunch of topics here. I don't want to make a super long video. This probably will be anyways, let's face it. But okay, so your attachment style has a lot to do with how you feel safe. So you remember I said there's anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. We'll use those two as they're kind of polarities as examples. So for an anxiously attached person, these are generally the people that feel, they get accused of being needy, which is really unfair, but these are people who tend to feel insecure, nervous, anxious, and want to feel connected with others, and that helps them to feel calm, right? So if you're going into do some psychedelic therapy work where you're going to be challenged by an intense psilocybin experience, for example, this is something you're going to want to know about yourself. I need more of a sense of connection, and that needs to feel okay. I need to not feel ashamed about connecting with someone, and that helps me to feel regulated, to feel peaceful, at ease, balanced, safe. Right. Conversely, people, again, who have avoidant attachment styles, they really need space. They need a little room to breathe, a little room to go inside, a little room to be by themselves, a little privacy, a little sense of safe distance where they have the choice to connect or not. Right. So you can imagine also in a psychedelic therapy session or psychedelic sitting session where maybe you have an overzealous therapist who really wants to get in there and talk with the person and really wants to get up in their business. And the person really feels triggered and threatened by that because for them, what makes them feel safe is a bit of space, a bit of feeling, having the option to connect or not connect, right? So your attachment style has a lot to do with what registers as safe. And again, safe has everything to do with how capable your nervous system is of going into a healing state, healing process, right? So you can imagine, hopefully you can start to see how this all starts to kind of work together here. And I want to just kind of flag this idea of regulation. I've talked about it here on the channel before. It may be a term you're familiar with, but I want to just kind of highlight this because it's also another angle on this whole discussion of trauma and attachment and safety and healing and all this, right? So, regulation is essentially the state when I'm feeling self-regulated. It means I know how to calm and soothe and balance out my nervous system, bring myself back to a nice balance of sympathetic and parasympathetic function. I feel safe, I feel calm, I feel present, I feel engaged, I feel socially available, I feel playful, easy, flowing, relaxed, right? So that kind of sense of safety is what's called being regulated. Now, generally speaking, the way human beings develop from infanthood to adulthood, we move first through a phase of needing co-regulation. So when we're little babies and our brains are developing and our sense of self is developing, we need our parents or our caregivers to help us regulate our emotions. This is why babies cry and need soothing, because we don't have the capacity to self-regulate yet. We don't know how to self-regulate yet, right? So all human beings' nervous systems are built on a foundation of a model of co-regulation. And that's true for the rest of our lives, to be honest. So a lot of us feel a need for a sense of emotional regulation through connecting with others, right? This is what's called co-regulation. Now, this is a whole other topic. We'll talk about it sometime. There's a lot to say about social dynamics and co-regulation, when it's appropriate, when it's not. How do we get that need met socially? But essentially, when we have people who are tuned into us and care about us and are willing to connect with us and help us feel connected, that helps to regulate our emotions and send safety signals to our nervous system. So there is this piece of regulation. Well-done therapy, including well-done psychedelic therapy, puts this at the forefront as being really important, in my opinion. You've really got to be able to tune into each other and help a person who's on a psychedelic feel safe first and foremost. And that might include some co-regulating to get that person into the sweet spot where they feel okay. So the other side of that, though, besides co-regulation, is self-regulation. And I've talked about this on the channel before a lot, and there are a lot of different techniques and ways to help you self-regulate. But what I want to say about self-regulation and attachment in the context of psychedelics is that the real way that self-regulation is supposed to work. So all things going right, if we're raised properly and we're raised in a secure attachment style, and that gets really internalized and really like imprinted in our nervous system, we will take the healthy co-regulation that was consistently available from our parents or our caregivers. We will internalize that, and we will kind of implicitly, intuitively learn how to self-soothe, self-regulate through stressful moments and events, right? But a lot of times this never gets learned. I would kind of venture to say a lot of people out there, maybe a majority of people, don't know how to self-regulate. And so there are a lot of tools and techniques like I just mentioned, but I think the real deal of self-regulation is secure attachment. So the more you start to learn how to internalize and apply secure attachment as a relating skill, this is kind of another topic I'll be talking about, and you really learn how to create secure attachment with yourself, it will automatically self-regulate you. These two things are tightly intertwined, regulation and attachment. So all of this, of course, plays into what happens on psychedelics. So I just want to set all this up. I know that's like 20 minutes of me yammering on here, just creating an understanding, but hopefully this kind of paints a clearer picture of what these fundamental needs of the nervous system are in order to have like a good therapeutic healing process, or even just a really good positive psychedelic experience. So let me just kind of add one more idea here, and then we'll pivot on into psychedelics. Fair enough? So the last thing I want to say about regulation and how your attachment style impacts what feels safe to you is that I kind of just said this, but I want to highlight it because I kind of just said it in passing. If you understand how to create secure attachment, and I think, let me be honest here, I see a lot of information and framing in therapy, in the therapy world, about attachment, where they kind of paint the picture that's this thing that takes a long time to earn in therapy, and it's the end goal of therapy, and it's what you want to kind of work towards is the thing, the final completion. It gets painted as this thing that's really difficult. The message I want to convey to you here about secure relating is that it's a skill that you can learn. It's a set of ways of behaving that you probably already recognize to some degree, and that you can really internalize, start applying, and will create the effect of secure relating, which is this sense of safety and well-being and being regulated. The other thing I want to say is that I actually think secure relating is the prerequisite. It's the key that we need up front to therapeutic healing that really unlocks our capacity to really feel safe enough to actually heal. So it's not this thing we're working towards at the end of the journey. I actually think we need to pick up the tool of secure relating up front and plug it into our journey every step of the way. And that's really what starts to undo a lot of these, traumatic imprints and this kind of knots in our being and these patterns of dysfunction and dissociation and getting triggered and all that happens from trauma. Really the key that or the soothing balm, if you want to go that route with it, that we're going to kind of put all over it and heal the whole thing, is this skill. It is a skill, I want to make this clear, of secure relating. So, okay, point hopefully made. Let's pivot to how this all fits now with psychedelics. Okay, by the way, shameless plug here. I'm just going to be kind of like forward here for a moment and be honest with you guys. First of all, if you've made it this far in the video, I realize we're probably 25 minutes, give or take, in already. Thank you for staying with the conversation. I hope it's valuable to you. Also, I'm going to just say, please help my channel grow. I'm kind of relax and chill about getting the word out about all of this content. Please do share it with people. Please give the thumbs up. Please subscribe if you resonate with this content. Share it with others. Link it on, websites where you feel like it's appropriate, forums or whatever, Reddit, that kind of a thing. And please, if you have any comments, questions, disagreements, clarifications, etc., please do feel free to leave them down below. I do value, kind of a discourse with you guys as an audience. I want to know more about who you are and, what you think and what you need and what you feel so I can better serve you. And of course, I'm just going to also put it out there. I am a coach. I am a hypnotherapist. And this is kind of my current area of focus right now. Helping people resolve attachment stuff is a huge part of this. If you feel moved to work with me, if you resonate, you feel like I have a clear understanding of things, you like my personality, you feel like we might click together as people, you have questions for me, even just you want some recommendations of maybe someone else you want to work with who's closer to you, do get in touch with me. Do send me an email. Link will be down below. I'm happy to set up a free Zoom call with you where we can meet, connect, and maybe work together if it feels like a good fit, or maybe I can refer you to someone else who might be a better fit for you. All of that. So just want to put that out there and kind of be shameless about that for a moment. Okay, so enough said. So let's talk about psychedelics and how all of this fits with everything I just shared with you about attachment. So the first thing I want you to really understand here that I think is really often not understood in the psychedelic community, in the psychonaut community. I think this is often not understood in kind of the medicine, community. So ayahuasca and, that kind of thing, the plant medicine community, is that your attachment issues will be brought up by psychedelics. They will. Psychedelics as part of that deconditioning agent that kind of strips you back to more deeper core aspects of your being. Psychedelics as being something that can be overwhelming and triggering and make you feel unsafe. Psychedelics that can really stir up maybe nausea and physical body load issues that really make you frightened and make you feel like a little vulnerable child again. They will, by their very nature, the medicine, even the easier ones, will bring up your attachment patterns. And quite frankly, this is a video for another time also. In general, when you start to notice your attachment patterns, you'll see how you project it onto all kinds of scenarios and situations, whether that's dating or making new friends or being social or what have you. We tend to project, again, the foundational filter, we tend to project it all over the place in our lives. But that's especially true when it comes to psychedelics. So one thing that a lot of people don't get in the psychedelic community is that psychedelics do bring up your attachment issues and your attachment wounds almost inherently, almost every time. And usually it'll be brought up in, your relationship, to yourself, right? So self-judgment, shame, fears about your inability to, move forward in life, feeling like you need something that you don't have or that you're missing something, feeling like you, like you just tend to self-isolate and lock yourself away and disconnect from the world and you got to do it yourself and you don't know why you're kind of like this. Psychedelics will stir all that up, right? So your attachment stuff with yourself, right? Psychedelics will also stir up your attachment stuff and have you project it onto your guide or your therapist. So this is, therapists are trained in this. Therapists are trained to look at projection, look at the way, what's called transference and countertransference, the way that you project your distorted core beliefs onto people around you, including your therapist, and your therapist is a certain kind of role and figure in your life. And so they know to look for this. A well-trained therapist knows to look for this. But guides don't a lot of times. Sometimes they do. There are guides who are therapists, and there are guides who are, trained enough to know to look for this stuff. But there are a lot of guides who aren't prepared for it and won't respond well to it. And projection could go either way. You could be projecting positive things onto your guide, like, oh, you're my savior, you're my helper, you're the best, you're the most amazing person I've ever met. Transference and projection from your attachment stuff could be, even romantic feelings on your guide or on your therapist. It can also be the other way around, where you're like, you're trying to hurt me, you're trying to control me, you're trying to manipulate me, you're trying to take advantage of me, you're blah, 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 blah. Right? So it's very easy for the medicine, whether you're on it or even before you take it, anytime I think we're in the presence of like a deeply transformative space, like a place where we're going to go and get challenged and perhaps even touch like a spiritual experience that kind of transcends our normal pattern. Anytime that's on the plate, whether it's a personal development seminar, whether it's maybe travel to a new country, and certainly with psychedelics, spiritual practices, and meditation retreat, I tend to think that all of these things tend to stir the pot of our attachment system very deeply. And we will project onto not only ourselves, we will project onto those facilitating the work with us. We will also project onto the medicine itself. Okay, so psychedelics will save me. Psychedelics are the thing I need in order to be whole and complete. Psychedelics are evil and going to break my mind and warp me and are there to hurt me. So we can get into these push-pull dynamics of projection of our attachment issues all over the place. And it comes up especially so in psychedelic therapy. Okay. Now, I want you to know that so that you can start to sort for that, because if you know that about yourself, then you can start to track when you're projecting and track, oh, I'm kind of projecting that I know a certain thing, or that the way I see things is how it is, or the feelings I'm feeling are real and one-to-one a match with the reality of the situation around me. If we start to track that and go, oh, this might be a projection, I might be wrong here, this might be some old stuff, this might be based in an old dynamic, then we can start to work with the medicine, work with ourselves, work with our sitter, our therapist, our guide, whatever we have, to use that projection as more of a tuning in to where our wounds are, right? So we can follow this down to what the stuff is, or if we're not tracking for it, we can end up just kind of dumping on everyone, and it can totally distort the success and really the healing, right? Let me see. What else do I want to say about, how psychedelics bring up attachment stuff here? So basically, this is one of the things that doesn't get talked about that we really want to know and be tracking for. If you don't feel safe, that's important and needs to be honored. And if you don't feel safe, in your day-to-day, in your skin, that's important to notice. If you don't feel safe with yourself, that's important. If you don't feel safe with your guide, that's important. And it's important to communicate about and bring into the picture, because that is the territory of attachment. And once we start to realize, oh, okay, this is the work, it's self-revealing in the relating, then we kind of know what to work on. The other thing I want to say about psychedelics bringing up our attachment stuff inherently is a lot of times how this tends to go down for people, pardon me while I itch my nose here, how this tends to go down for people is I take a psychedelic and I get rattled. I have this deep experience of fear or feeling unsafe or feeling like something's off, or I'm really sad for no reason, or I'm really like there's a lot of emotion moving through me, or I'm really confused and feel lost, this kind of a thing. And a lot of this is actually your body, your nervous system, your unconscious mind, however you want to think of that, presenting a pattern that was a dynamic or a way that you felt when you were really young and the attachment, system was first coming online. It's presenting that wound to you as a feeling or a set of emotions or thoughts now as an adult. So a lot of times when we get these waves of like, whoa, where is this coming from? I don't know what this is. That kind of feeling. I'm sure you, if you've done psychedelics, you know what I'm talking about. A lot of times what that is your body communicating the pattern from when you were really young. It's the feeling that you felt when your attachment system was first wounded when you were younger, but presented now as just this without a memory, without a clear context of, oh, right, when I was 2, my mom neglected me when I really needed her, and now I have this feeling of being ungrounded and unseen and lost and overwhelmed by myself, right? We won't get like a clear memory. We'll just get, I feel lost and overwhelmed and like I'm all by myself here, right? So we'll get the feeling. It's kind of this communication of the pattern. And what it is your deeper kind of inner healer, your unconscious mind, bringing it up to the surface through the medicine to show you somatically, experientially, what the pattern is. And part of the trick there is, can I recognize this? Or can I intuitively work with, understanding that this might be an old attachment wound moving through me as a felt sense in the moment. This is really important to get, because a lot of times we, again, if I feel unsafe, right? I take a bunch of mushrooms and I come onto it, and as I'm coming onto it, I start to feel really unsafe for no reason. And let's say I'm in a situation with a couple people, we're tripping together, or someone's sitting me, and my mind goes to set and setting, and I start projecting out onto the person or the situation. Oh, you're making me feel unsafe, or there's something about the situation that's unsafe. I start going outward with it. I may be totally missing the real nectar of the truth, which is, oh, right, there's a pattern here, feeling unsafe in my nervous system in the first place, right? So this is what psychedelics often do to help us heal. They open up and reawaken these felt sensations of not feeling safe again, of feeling insecure, of not feeling securely attached, that we can then address and create, healing experiences, healing responses to, that start to rewire that. So the opportunity here with psychedelics is, as these things open up, if we recognize them, we know how to work with them and tune into them instead of fight that, then we can bring healing interventions into these places and create a new pattern there, create a new wiring in this old place where we didn't get our needs met and we didn't feel safe back in the day. Okay, I know it's a long video and I'm yammering on. Hopefully this makes sense and it's really useful for you. So let's move to the next section here. Okay, so the next thing I want to say here and really convey to you is that if you have any sort of the insecure attachment style, so if you're anxious or you're avoidant or you're kind of ambivalent, if you have any of these anxious, unhealthy attachment styles here, sorry, not anxious, but insecure attachment styles here, it will cause distortions in your understanding that you arrive at. So again, if you think of your attachment system as kind of the foundational filter that you process life through, remember that from early on when I was kind of setting the context of the conversation here. If you think of this as the filter that you process life through, right, that really determines your understanding of yourself, your understanding of those around you, and the relational dynamics that are happening around you. If you have wounds in any of that, it will distort the lens through which you are processing and looking at life. If your filter is distorted, okay, and then you throw in a bunch of psychedelics, you have a distorted filter, and you take a bunch of LSD or mushrooms or what have you, it will cause whatever epiphanies and insights and ideas and ways that you process the psychedelic experience. It will cause you to have probably some sort of distorted understandings or thoughts or conclusions that arise from that distorted filter. I hope this makes sense, right? This is also true, when I'm working with clients a lot, this comes up a lot where, we get to working on some piece and there's kind of a younger part of that person talking, and the beliefs and the conclusions and the emotions and the perception of oneself or life around them, will have this certain distortion of understanding that comes from whatever the wounds in their attachment style are. So with psychedelics, that all gets really amplified. Now, what you see a lot online, if you're kind of in any of these spaces where people are having psychedelic conversations, especially I see this on Reddit all the time, what you'll see a lot is people having these, psychedelic epiphanies that are kind of perhaps ungrounded in any study of therapy or psychology or how human beings work or any, even any study of spiritual or philosophical understandings. We just have kind of, people who have never thought about any of this stuff eating psychedelics, having these big epiphanies. A lot of times these big epiphanies have these flavors of distortion, rationalizations, generalizations, kind of accusatory thinking or grasping thinking. There'll be conclusions that are kind of sus, that are kind of not healthy, clearly a little off the mark. And that's all from some distortion in the filter that's kind of deeper and downstream. I do want to say, I said this recently on Reddit. I've said this before in videos, but it's a point I'll have to keep making over and over because it's a key thing that I really want to communicate. There are places in us, and I'll make a video about this at some point, I'm sure. There are places in us that psychedelics don't automatically rewire and reach. That for as powerful as a mystical experience on ayahuasca or 400 mics of LSD or what have you can be, there are parts of us, there are corners of our being that, from what I've seen with myself and what I've seen with my community and all the people I know who have done psychedelics, and including all the spiritual people I know, there are places in us where the psychedelic isn't necessarily likely to rewire us or challenge us or awaken us or heal us. And instead, it'll go unexamined and continue to be part of the filter through which we process ourselves and life around us. In my experience, the primary example of that is the attachment system. And left to our own devices, psychedelics might kind of get in there and work it a little bit, but it's not really a guarantee. In fact, the attachment system's pretty robust to the psychedelic states even. But if put together in the proper way, we can get in there and rewire it. So it's not hopeless, but I want to make the point and kind of make it clear that, when we have these distortions of understanding and these distorted conclusions that are coming out of a distorted filter, that are coming out of wounds in our attachment system, that's just kind of the default thing that happens, but it's not the only way it has to be. We're not stuck with that. We're not doomed. It's not like psychedelics are a fail. Far from it. You can actually use psychedelics to really deeply rewire your attachment system if done properly, and correctly. But I want to kind of pepper that into this point because it's highly relevant that, as we kind of come to the conclusions that we're coming to on psychedelics, that we realize and account for, could this conclusion be coming from my, attachment wounds and, distortions in the filter of how I understand myself, distortions in my filter of how I understand the world around me, my relationships, my parents, my personal history. And that's unconsciously or at a deeper, subtler level, shaping what makes sense to me and the way I think and the way I feel about things. And that's kind of, impacting the conclusions I'm coming away from. So, if you're looking at doing integration work, after a psychedelic session, and you're looking at, okay, well, I had these experiences and I learned these things, you might lay those out to, if you have a really good, integration specialist or integration therapist, you might lay these beliefs and conclusions out to your integration therapist, and they might go, kind of, is that true? Or does that really work? Or is that really healthy? They might challenge you on it. If they're doing their job properly, they might challenge you on it because some of this stuff may be coming from a distorted place in you. So, so there's that. And we'll kind of jump into another segment and then we'll kind of wrap the video here. Thank you for staying with this. I hope it's all useful and valuable. Okay, another key point here that I really want you to get and understand is that if you have wounds in your attachment system, here's another way that this can all play out. is that your attachment style, especially if it's an insecure style of attachment, will shape how you relate to certain internal parts of yourself. So let me give an example here. Let's say you're kind of someone who's been through a lot, you have some trauma that you're working on, you tend to have this kind of vigilant, skeptical, distant, like fuck off, I don't trust anyone kind of attitude that you tend to relate to people in life through. And this to you feels safe, this to you feels normal, this to you feels sane and how it should be because of whatever you lived through as a younger person, and if that's you, by the way, my heart goes out to you. That's got to be really rough. But let's just imagine that this is kind of the situation, right? And let's say in a psychedelic experience, you're trying to go into the process, the hard parts of the trauma and really work through the painful stuff. But what happens instead? You end up taking the medicine and you have this whole blissful experience and kind of there's like an inner healer aspect to you that says, hey, don't worry about it. You're fine. Life's good. Everything's okay, right? Now, this might be your inner healer trying to give you a resource state or resource experience to help you heal, right? But if you have that wounded attachment style that's skeptical and doubtful, you may be dismissive to this part of you and be like, oh, that's not healing. Get out of here. This is just stopping me from healing. And you might get really kind of dismissive and totally miss out on what's emerging, which is this piece of healing or something maybe that already healed in you at an unconscious level. It's just your job to kind of like welcome it back and integrate it into yourself, right? So your attachment style can totally impact the way you relate to different parts of yourself that maybe are new or fresh, or that you've never seen before but have been there for a long time, that are important things to connect with in order to heal. And so this is another reason we want to account for our attachment style, because if we're confusing our attachment style for how it is, for how reality is, for what's safe, this is right for me, this is how it should be, this is, there's a lot of attachment wounds that get turned into justifications and rationalizations of this is how life is, this is how society is, et cetera, right? There's a lot of that out there. If you use that as the metric, and you dismiss it and you ignore that you're coming from a wounded place, you can totally miss out on big pieces of healing. And it can really set back your entire process, distort the process, slow things down, or kind of create more inner conflict and inner division than there needs to be inside of you. So this is another reason we want to be accounting for our attachment style, because it massively impacts, again, the way we self-relate. And, like I said in the beginning, secure self-relating is how we start to undo this. This is these things that I teach my clients and I'm primarily doing with my clients, and something I'll probably be making some sort of video course about because I feel like it's super important. Everyone needs to know how to do it. But secure self-relating is really one of the primary tools about how we start to undo this stuff. So if we are being permissive to our wounded parts and the thinking and the emotions that come from our wounded parts and normalizing that, being like, this is how it is, then we are totally missing out on some really good pieces of self-relating. So that's the other thing I wanted you to get here, that your attachment style can massively impact the way you're relating to yourself and your own parts in the psychedelic space. Okay, so it's been a lot of kind of like heavy doom and gloom, heads up for these problems kind of content in this video. I want to kind of leave the conversation before we wrap up here with just one kind of final, perhaps more clear, beautiful, optimistic, inspiring note. Okay, so from my point of view, the fundamental thing we're up to therapy in general, we're leveraging safe attachment to help you kind of rewire that stuff. That's at the foundation of all the other issues, most of the other issues anyways. In psychedelic therapy in particular, a lot of times the reasons people are coming to psychedelic therapy boil down to attachment wounds. And I know I just said a little while ago that, psychedelics don't automatically get into our attachment wounds and help us heal them. And we can end up kind of like acting through them and not realizing we are, and how that can distort the psychedelic experience. All very true. The other side of that, though, is if we are conscious of our attachment wounds, we know how to work with them, we know how to heal them. And especially, and this is where I hate to say it to some of you who want to DIY, where it's really useful to have a therapist or a safe other who understands attachment, who understands attunement, who can help you feel like you're safely connected to, right? To help you, to be a second resource, another person to help resource you. This is really why a lot of times you want to be working with therapists, or, someone who's trained in this stuff. A really good guide can do this work too. If it all lines up properly, what I'm trying to say here is if it all lines up properly, you put all the pieces together, you work, you recognize what's going on with your attachment wounds, you've already started to work on it, you know how to relate through this lens of secure attachment, you know how to recognize, attachment wounds in yourself, and your person you're working with does too. And you set all that up properly with the right medicine and the right dose in a set setting that all feels safe enough to you to go to these places inside of yourself. It is possible, and I think this is really the promise of psychedelic therapy, or at least one of the huge promising pieces of psychedelic therapy, is that we can go into these aspects of ourselves and really bring, again, that contrasting positive input. So if you're used to feeling abandoned and disconnected, and that makes you feel really unsafe, then you're working with a really good therapist who helps you feel safe and really doesn't abandon you and points out to you and helps you feel that you're not abandoned in this place, in this moment of overwhelm and unsafety and fear. That contrasting new input that's different from the old pattern can undo it and heal it, and you can permanently rewire your attachment wounds and clear them and let it go. It can be done, and I think this is one of the major promises of psychedelic therapy. This is something I think, quite frankly, is probably better done in moderate to lower doses for the most part. Probably best done first with MDMA, at least 2-3 times, because MDMA has more of that component of helping you feel safe. Hopefully you've already done some attachment work with the person you're working with outside of a psychedelic session, so that you've kind of set up a nice precedent and a nice groove together where you kind of know what to expect and you know how this work is done, and you know how to work with each other already. But when you stack all of that up together, you have the medicine in the mix, again, ideally MDMA, but could be, something else, and you really get into those corners. The potential here is really to permanently rewire that stuff, undo those wounds, neutralize all that old stuff, and have it really be released, not a part of your imprint in your nervous system. And what you get is a totally reset, renewed nervous system, attachment system, where your sense of self, your sense of other, your sense of what's safe and not safe gets rewired and healed. And that, to me, is one of the most beautiful things about this work. And quite frankly, in my view, one of the most beautiful things available on the planet. One of the deepest, most rewarding, most amazing things is seeing people feel deep well-being in their own nervous system. It is just so beautiful. It's so important. And so I just want to kind of say that and offer that and remind you that all of this is aiming towards, there are a lot of ways that people can use psychedelics to heal, and there are a lot of different levels of epiphany and healing and awakening. I think all that's wonderful and good and important, but I think if we're really getting down to the brass tacks, if the real, this is the work. This is the thing. This is the kernel of magic and where it is and where the real healing lies. So I just want to kind of leave on that note. I'll sum up a little bit here, then we'll wrap this, I'm sure, what's going to be a long video. Again, thank you for watching. If you've watched through the whole thing, I really appreciate you. So, okay, let me just wrap this up and we'll call it good. Okay, so hopefully at this point in the video, if you're still here with me, you have a better understanding of all the different ways that our attachment style and psychedelics kind of interact, and what to look out for there, what tend to be kind of dynamics and parts of how our attachment stuff comes up with psychedelic work. Also, what the potential is to heal and how this is so central to the entire process of letting go of trauma or healing or getting over depression or getting over anxiety or whatever the thing is for you. Hopefully this inspires you. Hopefully this touches you. To me, again, this is profoundly beautiful work and deep and poignant and all the things, but it really is what it's all about in my book. On a personal note, I, will say that for me, as someone, for those of you that don't know my story, I'll explain it another time. But as someone who started with psychedelics, back when I was a teenager and went through the whole gamut of spiritual practices and pursuits and personal development practices and pursuits and all the things and all the conscious community stuff and all that stuff, went through seeking of all kinds and sorts, trying to feel right, to feel healed, to feel better, to feel balanced, to feel free. And for me, what I noticed is when I finally start to experience and create the secure attachment with myself, that was the thing I was really seeking. And I think a lot of what we think of as spiritual seeking, a lot of what we think of as material success seeking, a lot of what we think of as the perfect relationship seeking, or personal development, like being my best self, all that kind of stuff. Really what we're after underneath all of that is an experience of feeling deeply regulated, deeply secure, deep well-being in ourselves, comfort in our own skin that comes really from, I think, the real key, the real thing, secure attachment. Just to summarize some of the points here that I made with you, because I made a shit ton, and then we'll call it good. Let me see. First of all, I want you to remember that attachment is the foundation of most issues and most trauma. It is the foundation of our nervous system's way of organizing itself and processing life around us. And so relationships and relating is integral to our sense of safety. Your attachment style has a lot to do with how you feel safe, how you go about feeling safe and regulated. If you understand how to relate via secure attachment as a skill, it can and will heal you. This is one of these things I'll be talking about a lot because I'm really, really all about it. Let me see. Psychedelics will tend to bring up your attachment issues just in general, maybe with yourself. Maybe they'll be projected onto your guide, maybe onto the medicine, maybe onto certain communities or parts of your experience. All of that would be normal, but something to start to notice and track and look out for. If you have some sort of insecure attachment style, it will cause kind of distortions in the filter, as I was saying, and those distortions in the filter will kind of cause you to kind of distort your sense making, your conclusion making, your epiphanies, the things that come out of your psychedelic experiences will often be distortions from this wounded attachment style. Your attachment style will shape, again, also how you perceive certain parts of yourself that are emerging in your psychedelic work, in your personal healing and growth work. So that's important to know, that you're not projecting from your attachment style without not accounting for it. Also, the promise of psychedelic work really is that we can unlock the attachment system and rewire it if all put together properly, but it's not a guarantee that just because you're reading psychedelics that they're going to reach there or heal that. I think that sums it up for now. Again, thanks. I realize it's a long video, but I hope it's a valuable one that really cuts to the heart, cuts to the chase of, what you've been trying to figure out about psychedelic therapy, helps you understand what the landscape of healing looks like and how attachment figures into that. Again, if you have any questions, do email me. I'm happy to, to answer questions that are one-on-one, or if you want to just leave a comment or whatnot down below, always deeply valued. Do the like, the subscribe, let others know I'm here. And I think we're going to wrap it on that for now. Much love to you all. I hope you're doing well. I do have more videos on the way for you. Thank you for your patience in the little gap where I was not uploading. And enough said, take care, guys.